People who have cut family members out of their lives. What was the final straw? When my mother tried to take my newborn son from the hospital, causing an entire lockdown of that part of the hospital, and she was trespassed from the property. When I came home with my baby 5 days later, she started shit again, and I told her to get out of my house. She refused, so I called the police, who came with guns drawn. So that was fun. It was also the very last time I ever spoke to her. Even my grandparents didn't speak to her for years because of this little stunt, and they were two of the most forgiving people in the world. When my aunt was bothered that my dad was not cheating on my mum like her husband was on her, so she started spreading vicious rumors about him at my great-grandfather's funeral. This is a woman who, when she found a cancerous mole on her skin, decided not to have it removed because she could then play the "how could my husband cheat on poor old me when I have cancer" card. She could have very easily not have cancer and be fine. But she's a cunt. My dad, the final straw was one morning. I was about to take a shower and heard him screaming at my mom. I ignored it and started to brush my teeth. Then I hear punches. I came out and saw him with his hand up, and I got in the way and screamed my lungs out, kicking him out. He was shocked and started to walk back up to the front door. When he got in his car, he tried to play it cool and ask my mom sorry and bullshit like that. I screamed again, love he, and never come back, and that's what happened. He never came back. Like most with narcissists for parents, it was a pile-up of shitty thing after shitty thing, until it was just too much shit to avoid dealing with. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells to avoid a big blowout. The last straw seems somewhat inconsequential, but you have to hold it up against years of crappy behavior, if that makes sense. I, unknowingly, moved to the same city as my half-sister. I always knew she was the favorite. Surprise grad party. While my mom forgot to set one up for me, she got a $200 clothes budget for back to school, while my clothes were perfectly fine. Bigger Christmas present budget, more affectionate, etc. But I never expected her to come visit my half-sister and not make any effort to come see me. I'd find out from her posting on Facebook, tagging my half-sister in posts about where they went to lunch, which happened to be right up the street from me. A couple of times I tried to see her before she left, but she was always conveniently about to leave at that time. We grew up in the same household, and she's married to my dad. It's not like she never saw me, or that I was the offspring of the man she hates. My half-sister has caused a lot of trouble in my family with drugs, a teen pregnancy scare, truancy, etc. But my mom has always treated me as a delinquent child. Now I speak to her as little as possible. I cut my mom out of my life. She never accepted the fact that I'm a lesbian. She refused to come to my wedding. There was a clear difference in she treated my brother's kids and my kids. Even when she would spend time with my family, she treated my biological son significantly better than my 4 non-biological kids, 1 stepkid and 3 adopted. The last straw was when she yelled at me when I refused to change my then 5-year-old son's name. She acted like he was a dog. He's a human being. She was toxic to my family. I can deal with her disrespecting me, but I refuse to put my kids through that. My mother is an addict, has been for close to 3 decades now. She was moderately clean for a few years, but then just started manipulating people, lying, stealing, and pitting family members against each other. Over the summer she attempted suicide thrice by taking a shit ton of pills. She really just wanted to be high on anything. She's unwilling to go a single day sober. Her worst crime in my eyes was convincing me that I was helpless and was in desperate need of help. She got me involved in her world of endless doctor and psych appointments. I was on so many goddamn meds because I genuinely believed I was sick like my mother. Complete garbage, and it seriously hurt my health. Maybe in a decade I'll be willing to talk, but in all honesty she's so far from my mind right now, and this may be really shitty to say, but I honestly wouldn't care if she died. Just like I don't care about millions of strangers whom die around me every day. My dad was always a shitty dad. Missing school events, staying late at work to fuck his coworkers, drugs. He ended up diagnosed with bipolar after my parents got divorced. He was living with their marriage counselor at the time. The two of them were constantly high together, and he rarely saw us. He never called us until he was having a manic episode and was in the hospital and feeling lonely. Suddenly his kids were worth talking to because he didn't have all his girlfriends anymore. We were always really supportive, even my mom was. We always tried to get him help and really wanted him to get better, but he didn't want to be better because he liked how it felt when he was manic. He didn't talk to me for 2 years and then texted me on my birthday saying he loved me. I didn't immediately reply, and an hour or so later there was a follow-up text asking me to come to court with him because he had been charged with driving under the influence and assaulting an officer. I had just finished law school when he sent this text. I wasn't worth talking to for years until I was able to help him. I haven't talked to him since. Years of emotional and physical abuse from my mother, bottled up, that for some reason I thought I had worked past. She broke me. She broke my father. She's nasty, entitled, and selfish. She loved her job more than her only daughter. All of the artwork I gave her as a child she would write part numbers all over work like it was scrap paper. She once told me to go commit myself while I was having a panic attack and then hung up on me. I worked my entire life to be the perfect kid, perfect grades, perfect manners, and I never got in trouble. She spent my 25th birthday party this year screaming at me outside of the bar that I was a horrible daughter and a drama queen and that I bring it all on myself. She hadn't even had a drop to drink. A few days later I told her how hurt I was by everything she had said to me, and she boldly exclaimed that she would not apologize for the way she felt. We haven't spoken since. I have now realized you can't save a relationship that was never there. My mom would rather sit in silence than talk about my life. She'll talk about her cats, the weather, my siblings. But if I mention anything going on in my life, we live in different cities, she's silent for a moment and then changes the subject to something she can control. She complains about my siblings to me and says unbelievably mean things about my very sweet dad to me. She refuses to believe that her chain smoking throughout her adult life, including pregnancy, has had any ill effects on me or her other children. That's just some of it. I don't know if anyone will ever even read this. It doesn't matter. My mom has always made me feel like I'm worthless despite my accomplishments. I haven't cut her out yet, but as soon as my dad dies, I will. He has some serious health problems and I want to keep my relationship with him. When I showed up Christmas Eve to tell them Merry Christmas, and my dad kept telling me every time I visit my mother gets upset. Then when I went upstairs to tell her Merry Christmas, she got my mentally handicapped sister to give me my gifts and to tell me no one was home. Obviously they were. I know their vehicles. Adopted or not, they are my family. But I can't afford to feel like shit that they don't forgive me for the mistakes I've made, moving out without warning, lying about stuff as young people sometimes do. My nana, grandmother on my dad's side, was just always so vindictive. When I was in middle school and high school, she'd make fun of my acne and say I was getting fat. Made me feel really self-conscious and liked to say who her favorite grandchildren were. If I disagreed with anything she said, she'd say she liked me less and would get my cousins expensive gifts and send me socks or underwear. Mind you, I was a child, so it was just super shitty. When my parents got divorced, caused my dad's numerous affairs, I was fucking pissed, sided with my mom, and then my nana just stopped talking to me, period. She thought 19-year-old me should apologize to my dad for not keeping his dick in his pants. What made me realize she was the worst person was when she'd come to town to visit my cousins, she'd take my pedophile uncle with her. He literally was in prison 4 years for fondling a toddler girl. She took him to my cousin's wedding, who has 2 young kids. Apparently fuck the law in her eyes, cause I'm pretty sure he couldn't leave the city he was in. My dad couldn't be bothered to call and ask how I was doing after a bilateral mastectomy. A year plus many complications later he never reached out on my birthday, the only time of the year I ever heard from him, which just so happened to be the day I was finally getting my reconstruction. I was still riding the high of anesthesia when I texted him and unleashed everything I'd felt about how he and his family had treated me since my parents had divorced 18 years prior. A few years previous to this, he had told me what a terrible kid I was because when he'd been in an accident due to his drunk driving, I never went to the hospital to see him. I was 14 when it happened and no one bothered to tell me until well after the incident. Cutting him out was one of the best, most freeing days of my life. Decided to stop the cycle. Every few years my brother and I would stop talking, usually for some perceived slight on his part, and I would be the mature one and try to reconcile. After about 40 years of this pattern, I decided I didn't want to waste my life with that negativity. We now live separate lives, much like a couple that admitted we were not right for each other. I have no regrets. Life is much better without the drama. A few days after my mom died, I was sued by my dad for the house my brother and I were living in. He left the home 2 years earlier. After 2 months of court appearances, the idiot judge jokingly said, "If you want the house so bad, just go break in." So he did. One day while my brother and I were away, our dad broke into our house and built a makeshift wall at the bottom of the stairs to divide the house top/bottom. We moved out the next week and haven't spoken to our dad or anyone on his side of the family since. After 34 years of being the not favorite child and enduring all sorts of abuse from my mother, dad just ignored what was going on. I called to wish her a happy Mother's Day. She was drunk, which was not unusual. I mentioned something my brother-in-law had said to me the previous week and she flew off the handle for God knows what reason. She started calling me all sorts of foul names, accusing me of heinous crimes, and just generally screaming at me for existing, not unusual for her. I stopped listening, pulled the phone away from my face, and slowly settled the receiver into the cradle, old style landline. I have never talked to her or my family again. 15 years, and, for all I know, she's still screaming into that phone. I have no regrets. A friend of mine's children were riding in a car that was struck by a drunk teenager, putting his kids in the ICU for a long time and giving them lifelong issues. My aunt bragged about sneaking into a $10 chili dinner fundraiser at the VFW to help pay for the ramp my friend would need on his house. She didn't know I knew the family. Parents have always been psycho, just bad people I just put up with. BC, you know. They are my family. I got happily pregnant this past summer and my husband and I told them last BC they are awful, and my mom was dead silent for 30 seconds before saying, "But you're so skinny. Are you happy? I have huge body image problems." Next time she saw me, 9 weeks pregnant, she put her hand in my bump and said, "Wow, showing so big so early." Then a month later, mommy dearest claimed a bunch of her meds were gone/missing/stolen. I have medication for anxiety, but I had to stop taking it once I got pregnant. She first called and asked me about filling some of my prescriptions for her prior to her accusing me. I actually agreed, but I couldn't call my prescription from our local pharmacy to a different pharmacy in a different state. Once I wasn't a medication source, I was worthless, and so she pinned being out of medication on me. The story was someone went into her house and got her prescription hash, called it in, and picked it up. She refused to go to Walgreens to check security footage, call her doctor, or the police, or talk to the realtor who had been showing their house to potential buyers, basically avoiding anything that would contradict her story. Oh, and apparently I stole $25,000 of jewelry she had already admitted that she accidentally donated to the Goodwill. She is a hoarder and brilliantly kept her jewelry in an antique tin that happened months prior. She and my dad had already contacted their insurance company. After all that hurtful shit was said, I said a lot of mean things back before severing all ties. My dad was about a month after that. He's still married to previous said nut. He showed up at like 7 AM the day after Labor Day, right after my husband left for work. He rage pounded on all the doors and windows before finally breaking in. He finds me, 4 months pregnant, hiding in the bathroom, and does some more aging. Accuses me and husband of fucking with them. Says we broke into their house and stole paperwork, marriage certificate, birth certificate, dad's military paperwork, to cause them hardship. Also asks if we drive 4 hours to their lake house, and stole a TV. We left a little $200 TV in a bedroom we used to sleep in at their vacay home. He then proceeded to search my house for a TV that wasn't even his, before coming back to the closet to continue raging. But he seemed satisfied I genuinely was clueless, and apparently down one crappy TV. I just sat in my closet sobbing, saying over and over I don't know what you are talking about. After a long awkward period he apologized and gave me a weird hug. Then suggested my husband does a better job locking all the doors and windows and leaves. Phil is a big guy. He called my dad after I made my husband promise not to escalate things. IDK what all was said, but my dad agreed we should go our separate ways. We haven't spoken to them since. Thankfully the rest of the family knows where the crazy lies and are supportive. The baby is due in a month. I'm more than a little afraid they will pop back up. They have deep pockets and are used to getting their way, typically buying forgiveness. They currently live out of state, but still have several houses here. One that's only 30 minutes away. Almost 6 months with no contact, and I'm the happiest I have ever been. Woo.